Hello, I'm Ba Adonai, and welcome to Nirvana. Kurt Cobain is alive. The 72 radiant diamond facets of the 27 Club in 144. I'm an ayahuasquera, curandera, perfumera of the psychedelic plant spirit medicine of ayahuasca in the Shipibo Conibo ancient traditions of ancient Peru, which is a trained master healer facilitator of this rare medicine. I'm also a digital artist, an artist in various media, a musician, visionary thinker, and poet. And prominently, I'm an all ages and abilities ecological educator. This is Facet 1 and 73 of a 72-part series in which there are 2 facets per article and or video. This facet is entitled Original. I've created this series in order to tell the compelling story of my incredible, life-changing experience of receiving proof that Kurt Cobain is alive. The proof that I offer is a testimony which is incredibly self-evident of the reasoning for opening your mind to this possibility, the way that it logically seems to make sense and be the truth, rather than expecting you to just believe this by taking someone's word for it. And that will come out throughout the entire series. This proof was a work of true, incredible mastery that was given to me as a gift from the master plant teachers of ayahuasca. But it was not just visions of ayahuasca, but the combination of 2 life experiences. The first was that I received an ongoing series of information-rich visions about a man in Peru who I had no idea was Kurt Cobain, over the course of 6 ceremonies. Then, the second transformative event which rendered this into proof. About 1 to 2 years later, I progressively found out that the entire vision sequence was rich with incredibly striking and meaningful references to the lyrics of the entire Nirvana discography and the news media coverage of Kurt's supposed death, as well as interviews and public statements from Nirvana. It was that which made me realize that these visions had been about Kurt Cobain. And all of these visions were presented in such a way as to illuminate not only that he is alive today, but also that his transition into a new life in Peru through a faked death was always his plan from at least the very beginning of the band. This facet will give a run-through of the many correlations that I found. It just so happens to require special knowledge of these Shipibo Conibo ayahuasca traditions to be able to see that, but with that information, the meaning of the lyrics is explosively revealed. In fact, this documentary provides a skeleton key of relevant context by which to find much more unified meaning in songs and the interconnection of songs throughout each album, as well as the creative arc storyline of the discography in order. The way that this was presented by ayahuasca was built in with a special defense against criticisms which may propose that my own fascination with the band or Kurt had somehow produced these visions as a wishful or hopeful expression of my own psyche. The magic of it was that I had little or no interest whatsoever at all with any of the mainstream entertainment media, and I certainly hadn't thought about Nirvana at all since 1997 at the latest. I was actually against the mainstream entertainment media because I thought it was somehow evil or Illuminati, which I now understand is not true. At the time, my taste in music was purely in grassroots electronic music with no lyrics. Thankfully, that turned out to be a huge plus for me when I finally rediscovered Nirvana with a new perspective a year after receiving these visions. I feel that I was quietly guided by ayahuasca outside of the ceremonies through the subtle spiritual influence of the plants to explore Nirvana in 2018. It's truly a miracle that I did, which I'm sure is much more than a coincidence. This is the beautiful, globally implicative story of the co-creation of a bridge of powerful and living interconnection between the plant spirit medicine teachers of the Amazon rainforest of South America and the mainstream entertainment media. Through the plant relationship with Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, the medicine was able to slowly and progressively realize the very real agenda of the spiritual plant teachers to bond these two worlds together. To many, these two worlds might seem like opposites, but the plant teachers were drawn to it because of its leadership with music and with its colorful, backlit, moving pictures like TV and movies or concert stage visuals. If you think about it, this actually has so much in common with the ancient traditional ceremony music of ayahuasca called icaros, and their radiantly luminous visions, which also seem backlit as moving imagery like TV. And actually, in some plant medicine traditions, such as the Bwiti Iboga tradition and Santo Daime ayahuasca ceremonies, freeform dance and choreography are also part of the psychedelic ceremony experience, which is another thing common to the shows as well, something that the plants were also very drawn to. This vision sequence I experienced not only revealed that Kurt is alive, but also his current location, his new line of work since leaving the music industry, all about his new music, and also how his health is doing. He's in Peru, at least seasonally, living at his new home in Iquitos and his jungle camp in the Amazon rainforest outside of the city of Iquitos. He has moved on in his line of work to become an ayahuasquero, curandero, perfumero, and ayahuasca brewer, which is a master healer of the ayahuasca plant medicine in the ancient Peruvian Shipibo-Conibo tradition of vegetalismo, with a major specialty in working with the ayahuasca perfumes of Murray and Landman Co., such as Agua de Florida, which are actually ancient traditional perfumes associated with ayahuasca healing. His other main specialty is as a high-volume brewer of ayahuasca, and his task is to produce a large volume of the plant medicine each year for widespread distribution across the world. In this work, his health has greatly exceeded any normal expectations of someone who has been in his position health-wise, and he is doing very well with a healed and radiant body which has aged with youthful and soulful beauty. He has worked out his posture to a nice straight spine and developed his muscles to a more healthy and moderate weight. Also, he continues to be one of the best looking people with a geometrically harmonious face. He has not used plastic surgery to change his appearance in such a way that has sacrificed the benefit of a beautiful face. His role as a professional master healer of this medicine involves a mind-blowingly beautiful and in-depth specialty in music. As you'll find throughout your research into ayahuasca healing ceremonies, ayahuasqueros sing a very special type of ancient traditional healing music called icaros, which have many rare and potent properties for causing a perfectly compatible healing effect, which works in total union with the psychedelic experience of the journey. This music can sound absolutely stunningly beautiful, beyond compare, and would take Kurt's musical path soaring to the next level, which would touch people to the soul level and radically change their lives, which in a different way he has always done. Now, beginning at the beginning of the story, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I too, like Kurt Cobain, am an ayahuasquera, curandera, perfumera of the Shipibo-Conibo traditions specifically. And that is why I was chosen to carry this information for Nirvana, because I would be the most qualified to speak about these points. The only difference for me is that I'm not a specialist of brewing the ayahuasca medicine like Kurt, although I have done it before. These visions came to me during a series of ceremonies in the summer of 2017 when I was 34 years old. It was during this series of ceremonies that I finally graduated from my 15 years of rigorous and devoted practice in the tradition of vegetalismo, and I was named by the medicine as a full-fledged ayahuasquera, which is fairly synonymous with the term curandera, and in my rare case, I'm also a perfumera, which is a specialist in the complex perfume healing of this medicine. I'll take a moment here to offer a disclaimer. As a master ayahuasquera, I must warn you that I am in no way offering formal medicine teachings through this format. Unfortunately, if you would like to practice ayahuasca, you are on your own, and you will need to do your proper research without my help. In retrospect, I couldn't have been more happy with this vision sequence about this mystery man in Peru who turned out years later to be Kurt Cobain, as the main vision sequence going on in my series of 6 ayahuasca ceremonies associated with my graduation. This was the perfect way to deliver this incredibly sensitive and dynamic information about Kurt Cobain being alive, for many reasons. For example, this method couldn't possibly be more thematically appropriate to the fact of what Kurt Cobain has been up to in Peru since his transition, as well as his values and reasons for choosing that new path. As Marshall McLuhan said in his book Understanding Media, the medium is the message, meaning that the medium through which content is conveyed is just as, if not more meaningful than the content itself. Anyone with a little experience of having tried ayahuasca would definitely understand me when I say that this is a way to learn which transcends the complex censorship paradigms and limitations of the misinformation machine inherent to our modern society. In fact, this misinformation machine through which we all interact every day is exactly what Kurt harnessed in order to fake his death. Therefore, it's absolutely crucial that the information about him being alive would not be originally and fully transmitted to me through the same flawed system which obscured the truth that he is alive. Plant teachers like ayahuasca truly transcend this misinformation machine. The way that the medicine works with you on such a spiritual and ultimately physical, emotional, and psychological level allows learning which is synonymous not only with information transmission, but of true realization, including personal growth, healing, and the expansion of consciousness, as authored by the all-knowing source of creation, which we call spirit. Also, the Shipibo Konibo traditions honor ayahuasca as a true divine mother, one who loves each person with a love beyond limitations and heals as the primary art form, from that very integrity of true mastery of mother, much alike to Gaia. So this could not be a more credible source, free of bias, constraints, and corruption. So, let's get down to it and discuss how the visions corresponded with the Nirvana materials. So far, I've already given you a basic rundown of what the visions conveyed as a whole, but after we investigate the lyrics and some of the Nirvana materials which correlate, I will tell the exact story of how the visions came up and what they looked like. So, beginning with the lyrics. I've summarized these themes throughout the discography into a simple lyrical code. Using this short list of topics, in combination with this special knowledge of Kurt through ayahuasca, and the knowledge I'll share here of the plant medicine traditions, it creates a special way to radically break open the meanings of the lyrics. Many fans have expressed that they find Nirvana lyrics incredibly coded, cryptic, and mysterious, and I know this will totally transform that experience. Also, as much as this is a little bit of work, I do encourage you to look up the lyrics of the songs I'm mentioning and confirm for yourself with all of the lyrics right in front of you for each song. First, here's a quick list, or the lyrical code, just without explanation. First of all, the theme of water and fish. Then also the theme of perfume, flowers, and the use of alcohol for healing, as well as, of course, the complex sensitivity to the psychology of scent. Then we have a sentimental and spiritual aboriginal tone on tobacco. And I will have a lot to say about how the attitude of a healer is present throughout. But also combine that with a powerful respect for ecology and a radical feminism that resonates of the earth as the divine mother. Also, there is the concept of purging or throwing up as a way to relieve the system of chemical toxicity. And finally, the iconic Amazonian animal of the parrot. Now, that's my list, but we could come to it from another angle too. What are the major Nirvana themes, right? Of course, life and death, and with life, biology, fetal development, anatomy, plants, and more. Then water, of course, as symbolic of life and also perfume. Then psychology, chemicals, and anti-abuse. And you might add the punk ethos of freedom and anti-establishment ethics. Well, even just like that, it works so well as this statement about the medicine. Now, let's break that list open in terms of how it relates. First, water is the main overarching theme of the album Nevermind, and it's generally symbolic of life, which is a huge point about this. It's also symbolic of perfume, as many perfumes are actually called water, agua, including the traditional perfumes of ayahuasca, the Murray and Landman Co. series, such as the main one, Agua de Florida. Since Nirvana has a huge emphasis on perfume, of course the water also symbolizes perfume as well as life, which go perfectly together with this story. Now, perfume is not just mentioned, it's also the complex exploration of the psychology of scent in context with traumatizing scent experiences as approached from the mindset of a healer, with great concern for human health. Nirvana songs that go into the psychology of scent include Smells Like Teen Spirit, Lounge Act, Scentless Apprentice, Milk It, and Beeswax, spanning through Nevermind, In Utero, and Incesticide. And throughout the discography, such as the debut album Bleach, chemicals are also carefully investigated in the lyrics, showing distinction and clear sensitivity against ecologically harmful synthetic chemicals such as bleach or those found in commercial perfumes, and the complex chain reactions of their damaging effects, as opposed to alcohol as a biodegradable and non-toxic chemical. This is the sign of the ayahuasca perfumes, which are just made with alcohol and completely organic, to such an extreme degree that you could actually drink a small amount of the perfume for a remedy, and it is usually sprayed from the mouth in a fine mist through the room. And I'll return to the topic of alcohol soon. But coming back again to water, it's also the natural environment of fish, another Nirvana theme. And fish are the main traditional food of an ayahuasca practitioner of vegetalismo, which is the critical traditional practice which allows a person to train to become an ayahuasquero through long periods of intense isolation and fasting on fish, water, white rice, and plantain. Ideally, a vegetalista will only eat the type of rare fish which is vegetarian, which goes so well with the song Something in the Way. That song deeply contemplates the psychology of vegetarianism, also in such a way which reflects the long, intensive periods of isolation which are core to vegetalista dieta practice, in which, in a certain ancient style which is done deeper in the Amazon, the only water available is the drippings from the canopy, similar to the description in the song. And the vegetarian fish is chosen for vegetalismo because of its feelings, as a less aggressive fish. If you check those lyrics, you'll see what I'm saying. Now, the discography is rich with concern about chemicals in the water and health of the ecology and water table, as this is key to the survival of these traditions, which cannot survive without clean fish. And remember, we're talking about the third world here, where human waste contamination reaching the water table is a very real threat to these traditions. That all said, anyone who loves astrology would find it to be an absolutely classic example in this case, just how fitting Kurt Cobain's astrological sign of the Pisces, as symbolized by fish and water, really is to his personal life, his art, and his greater life path and destiny. Now, getting a little more into perfume, let's bring a little more context to the album In Utero and the invisible In Utero track, Gallons of Rubbing Alcohol Flow Through the Strip, in context with the theme of flowers and perfume in Scentless Apprentice and Heart-Shaped Box. Of course, the purely organic perfume of Murray and Landman Co. is made from the combination of flowers and alcohol. Also, traditionally, in combination with ayahuasca ceremonies, the agua de Florida is often lit on fire in large amounts when added to burnt offering bundles of flowers and candy. Now, this is a general Andean tradition, often done before ayahuasca or other psychedelic plant medicine ceremonies. That said, in the studio during the making of In Utero, there was a lot of pyromania with rubbing alcohol. Just the whole band lighting things on fire constantly with isopropyl. And this related to the song Gallons of Rubbing Alcohol Flow Through the Strip, which mentions alcohol and also lighting it on fire. I feel that song brings out the incredible power of these traditions. I would put it this way. Alcohol may be a powerful home remedy, but if you are stuck with just alcohol to resolve some problems, you have a new problem. The over-reliance on it, say for infection, such as perhaps the issues described in the song Mexican Seafood, can lead to dangerous side effects, and it quickly reaches the point of absurdity to imagine using it for some deep, real-life problems, such as condemnation of women and female sexuality as a massive collective wound, as opposed to how well it could work for those issues, actually, when applied as perfume through these powerful medicine healing traditions. For example, the strip in that song symbolizes both the woman's vagina and the pregnancy test strip. But the humor in this is that neither can be cleansed with alcohol. And it is common in ayahuasca communities to actually figure that a woman's recurrent yeast infections, the type of illnesses I point out from Mexican Seafood, can be caused by shame or outside judgment surrounding sexuality. Yet in both cases, using alcohol to cure this is a joke. Also, curing pregnancy or pregnancy test results this way is another joke here about the absurdity of alcohol use for curing these issues. And a tragic fact that lighting women on fire with alcohol did happen in the witch burnings as a way to purify them. In fact, the witch burnings were seriously criticized in Serve the Servants from In Utero as well. But all jokes aside, if you use alcohol and flowers in this potent, spiritually advanced, traditional way, you are looking at a real method for the healing of profoundly challenging life problems such as that in this song, like dealing with emotionally challenging relationship issues and judgment, as well as chronic yeast infections and much more. That information about alcohol goes beautifully with the song Scoff from the album Bleach, which definitely examines isopropyl alcohol from a healer's perspective, getting into biology on a deeper level. Of course, the song is mainly about statutory rape with alcoholic beverages potentially added as a date rape element, along with the urging of the line, "Give me back my alcohol," implying that potential statutory rapists should grab back their alcoholic beverages from young underage teens when these young people try to share drinks with them at a party or scene. This encourages more concern about the issue of consent. But also in that song, the metaphor of isopropyl alcohol is added as a double meaning through the lyric "heal a million, kill a million," which refers to the way that alcohol heals millions of cells while killing millions of bacteria. Nirvana's repetition of the theme of rubbing alcohol throughout their songs and their pranks with alcohol at the In Utero studio recording sessions, as well as the theme of the album Bleach about antiseptic chemicals, makes that seem likely. But once again, when put into combination with my information about the perfume and these sacred traditions of holistic healing, which can get to the root of deeper collective wounds such as violence like rape, puts this into similar context. With a way of using alcohol in the medicine perfumes as such a potent method for true deep healing, it will thankfully not be necessary to kill a million rapists just to save a million underage youth from rape. Instead, the medicine and these perfumes can be used to heal the violator mentality. Now, let's take a look at the song Mexican Seafood. Kurt claimed to be suffering with a stomach condition, which was causing him often to throw up. And I'd like to suggest that he was faking that condition as part of his plan to fake his death. Regardless, though, the song Mexican Seafood is not about his stomach condition. It's about throwing up in order to purge the body of toxins. And I might add, it's also about how toxins from human waste can affect the water table and contaminate any seafood supply in the third world. And if you're familiar with ayahuasca, you know, of course, that's a very common healing method of the plants, something that usually happens in these ceremonies, for people to throw up as a purging of toxins for healing. So that's why I think his stomach condition might have actually been faked as a symbolic reference to ayahuasca. So just running through this again. The title of Mexican Seafood indicates throwing up, as people often do with seafood in the third world, because throwing up is in the song. But specifically, it's that idea, like, what's in the seafood? Which, if you think about those lyrics about types of human sickness, you can imagine a person's human waste can be incredibly toxic. So in third world countries like Mexico, when human waste is endangering the water table, because of human waste facilities being compromised by the poverty of the country, you know that might be causing some of the problems with the fish. The same is very much the case in Peru, where vegetalistas in ayahuasca tradition are directly relying on hand-caught fish for their observance of the traditions, which are very hard to follow without fish as the primary food. And so Nirvana's interest in this topic shows a concern for the protection of ayahuasca traditions through safety of the environment. Also, that kind of alarm about the safety of the water table is also shown in the song Hairspray Queen, in which the Hairspray Queen is also the Mother Earth. And it's not immediately obvious, but it's also that theme in the song Blue, and just a lot of the concept behind the album Bleach, which Blue is the first song of. Because bleach itself is a very harmful, toxic, synthetic chemical which causes a lot of damage to the water table and ecosystems, especially in the third world. You see, blue alludes to complex chain reactions of events, such as chemical damage to the ecology, by the way that it points out the connection between shame and a stain on the clothes. And this points to the unseen and perhaps unnoticed next step in the chain reaction, which is to use bleach to resolve the stains. And we know that leads to the next chain reaction, which is the ecosystem and water table damage. That in turn leads full circle through drinking water to damage the digestive flora, potentially causing diarrhea and more embarrassing stains. Now, coming back to ayahuasca tradition. Any ayahuasquero is familiar with the importance of tobacco to these medicine traditions. Although tobacco is honored as key to plant spirit medicine in general, it is the most critically needed in ayahuasca medicine. Now, in this work, the type of tobacco used is different, and it is not a poison, but a medicine. It's called mapacho, and it's grown and cured completely organic. In fact, the strain has no genetic effects of chemical influence of any kind. Actually, it's so pure that traditionally it is often made into a tea and consumed in large amounts for the amazing healing effects, which are known for clearing negative energies and even exorcism of demonic entities. On the opposite side of the spectrum, any store-bought Western tobacco would have you in the hospital getting your stomach pumped if you drank a tea made from it. Mapacho is sacred, and it is medicine to the Shipibo Kunibo people. Without mapacho, ayahuasca ceremonies absolutely cannot be conducted, and a perfumero has many more reasons than just an ayahuasquero to use it often throughout the ceremonies. Now, Nirvana were all smokers, and their way of sharing tobacco with each other was very akin to the traditional practices of generosity with this medicine. But since store-bought Western tobacco has so many negative connotations, it is only by the song Swap Meet that I can point out Kurt's reverence for this important plant. Yes, swap meat speaks of holding one's tobacco close to one's heart, within context of Aboriginal culture. And beautifully too, the band Nirvana did tend to keep their cigarettes in their heart pocket of their shirt for show, so that when they would grab smokes out of each other's heart pockets, they could publicly promote themselves gracefully acting in the traditions of this Shipibo medicine by lovingly gifting, even swapping, the tobacco. So now, let's take a look at the song Polly from the album Nevermind. Polly is a song that explores an iconic animal very well known to the Peruvian Amazon, the parrot. Now, the song was about an anonymous, unnamed 14-year-old girl who was abducted after a concert. But the name chosen for her in the song was Polly, and the concept of the cracker, which goes with the parrot in the form of a household pet, was used in order to enrich the story with a double meaning and metaphor. When you travel to Peru for ayahuasca tourism, you'll be immediately greeted everywhere you go by people selling parrot feather earrings, along with other ayahuasca-themed jewelry, including cross-sections of real ayahuasca vine made into necklaces. The parrot is generally tropical too, and found naturally in many other tropical regions, but the added context here is the ecological sensitivity expressed in this and so many other Nirvana songs as well. Polly is a sobering warning against taking an animal out of its natural environment and trafficking and exploiting the animal for use as a pet. When compared to the story of the abduction of the young girl, this metaphor goes so deep to explain the cruelty of capturing animals from the wild and putting them into often very questionable and abusive homes. In fact, very sadly, the sexual abuse of parrots is quite common, as well as extremely psychologically damaging to them, as it actually causes hormonal imbalances just by touching them on the tail and outer wing feathers. Animal abuse is just one of many forms of abuse that Kurt describes in his lyrics, from the perspective of a true curandero, someone profoundly compassionate, alarmed, and yet also constructive and highly strategic at harm reduction and leadership. The ecological point about Polly is also so much more relevant when you realize how many other Nirvana songs are voicing against ecological dangers, especially with a holistic ecological mindset, which again is the mindset of a vegetalista like Kurt and I. Respect for nature is a huge Nirvana theme, and I won't be able to list off all the songs that are about it, but here's a short list, including Blue, in context with the whole album theme of Bleach, which we discussed here, as well as from Nevermind, Polly, territorial pissings as related to political corruption, which leads to poor sanitation facilities in impoverished countries such as Peru, Stay Away as related to the poisons of our second skin, clothing, as it poisons the soil in toxic waste dumps, Something in the Way, as we've discussed here, and From In Utero, Scentless Apprentice is about the pollution of the soil, Heart-Shaped Box as to the complex genetic health and properties of the flower, Pennyroyal Tea as to the vast topic of the quality of the plants that we ingest by way of how they can be produced oppressively as a product, and From Incesticide, Mexican Seafood, as we have discussed here, and Hairspray Queen, as also mentioned here. Also, the firm message against witch burning in Serve the Servants may also be a tone against the ecological dangers of exterminating ancient earth-honoring cultures, such as Wicca or even just women. Plus, the Peruvian Shipibo Conibo is also an ancient earth-honoring culture. In fact, it's against discrimination of that kind, and so I feel to also mention the song from Bleach called Swap Meet as well, which, although it doesn't involve a warning in that song, it is a beautiful message about earth-honoring cultures and shows respect for nature, which is of course absolutely core to the Shipibo Conibo, as their entire ancient culture is completely based on ayahuasca plant medicine. Also, another huge sign of a curandero healer of these traditions is intense compassion and the attitude of a healer. For example, in Rape Me, raising awareness about abuse in such a way as to show that it's not the fault of a victim. In Rape Me and Mr. Mustache, providing education about the certain psychological realizations and choices that support healing and recovery from trauma. In Mexican Seafood, Beeswax, and Polly, showing compassion for the suffering and the abused. In Turnaround, pointing out psychological issues which are often overlooked but present a risk to mental health. In Love Buzz, making sure people know how loved they are. In Floyd the Barber, Negative Creep and Scentless Apprentice, empowering the self-protective identification of seriously abusive or dangerous people around you. In School, Smells Like Teen Spirit and Son of a Gun, expressing major alarm about systemic abuse going unchecked. In Scoff, Rape Me and Swap Meet, providing positive encouragement to inspire making non-abusive choices towards others. And in Arrow Zeppelin, investigating philosophies that inspire the transcendence of societal oppression, which limits personal well-being. All these healers' attitudes are trademarks of Nirvana's lyrics and synonymous with the curandero's thought process. In fact, Nirvana's punk ethos of freedom, anti-establishment, and especially, such as in songs like Pennyroyal Tea and School, having the personal sovereignty to actually discerningly question authority figures is deeply knit with the importance of questioning abusive people's actions as they make a continual negative impact. This is preventative, therapeutic, and healing. Obviously, Kurt Cobain was not just any hardcore punk. He was intrinsically also hyper alert to issues of sexism, racism, homophobia, and institutional oppression, as well as systemic abuse. And he was someone extremely sensitive to trauma and the healing psychology, empathy, and self-compassion necessary to overcome it. So I just want to take this moment to show you this huge bouquet. So the story is, I've always been planning this video, and I was planning in my dreams. I always wanted to have a beautiful bouquet as part of the video. Look at this. This is the biggest bouquet I've ever been given. So what happened was, I actually had a smaller bouquet but anyway, I had no surface that I could really put it on for when I'm talking, that it would be seen, so I never did this, but it smells so good. But what happened was, well, partially of the way while I was filming this, I was actually given this came as a surprise delivery with like totally professional delivery. They will stop at nothing to make sure that this is delivered fully by hand. Anyway, and this just totally came in partway through the filming, and it's massive. This thing is big enough to actually fit right here. So you can see this puppy in the scene, and so it's in the video fully visible. And just look at this too, because we have all these flowers that are symbolic of Nirvana, like these lilies were in the Nirvana. And then we have also some orchids. Here they are. Orchids, quite a few of those. And then also baby's breath, lots of baby's breath, of course. And, also just my personal favorite, white roses. And but it's also other ones as well. So yeah, in some of the scenes, not all of them, you're going to see this in the background. Now, one of my very favorite Kurt Cobain quotes from his interviews is, "I'd like to own a perfumery someday." First of all, this reveals a correlation with the medicine's message that Kurt has chosen to become a brewer of ayahuasca. From the perspective of this documentary, since the perfumes are already provided by Murray and Landman Co. and normally used that way, this rare inclination to discover and use the ancient recipes to make the perfumes himself really brings out the DIY approach to life that Kurt Cobain also exhibited by making his own guitars, as well as his own t-shirts, his own logo, and much more, in a similar way to the DIY relationship with the making of the brew itself. That said, any perfumero would do well to make his own perfumes as well as his own brew at least once, in order to have the direct experience of handling each plant with his own hands, which causes a stronger emotional bond with the plants. As much as it's easier to be supplied in perfumes by Murray and Landman Co., I wouldn't be surprised at all if Kurt quite literally wanted to own his own perfumery so that he could regularly harvest his own flowers and do this as a spiritual practice by hand, when he was obviously so especially fond of flowers throughout his rock career. However, it's very interesting to note how this quote seems to imply a large volume production through a professional perfumery. And that corresponds so well with my visions that described him not just as someone who would make his own ayahuasca brew, but actually produce it at a high volume. With that said, it's important to also look at how this powerful quote relates with my current favorite Nirvana song, Scentless Apprentice. This is about my favorite as to a really obvious one that makes it seem like Kurt is alive, just if you know my story that he became a perfumero. Now, some might correct me and say, no, it's not about being a perfumero in Peru, it's about the book Perfume by Patrick Suskind. But I disagree with that, because it's about both. Scentless Apprentice is such a manifesto of how Kurt Cobain's plan to fake his death and become a perfumero is the perfect antithesis against the character of Jean-Baptiste Grenouille from the book Perfume, The Story of a Murderer. This song is expressing Kurt's view on the murderer in the story as being the psychological depiction of a typical abuser. Of course, the opposite of a healer and exactly what Kurt is against. And it just so happens that the character's murderous tendencies were based on the concept of reductionism, which holistic herbalists and plant-minded curanderos and many kinds of healers know is the opposite of how nature works and tends to lead to the abuse of plants and people. It's also very easily compared with objectification, something that Kurt was also loudly against as a radical feminist. Let's take a closer look at reductionism. Reductionism is a philosophical and scientific approach which aims to understand complex systems or phenomena by breaking them down into their simpler, more fundamental components. While reductionism is respected in the scientific study of plant-based medicines and has contributed significantly to the development of modern pharmaceuticals, it is not the predominant approach within herbalism, and it is the enemy of plant spirit medicine healing cultures. Herbalism as a practice tends to favor a holistic approach, one that values the complex interactions within whole plants over the isolation of individual compounds. Reductionism increases the chances of side effects by separating compounds from other properties of the plant which moderate and adjust the side effects. Also, as intrinsically linked with commercialism, it undervalues traditional indigenous wisdom of the plants while undermining these Aboriginal cultures by exploiting through corporate greed. Also, it does not lead to medicines which heal mind, body, and soul, but only the physical, which also undermines the way in which the whole plant really has that kind of capacity for much more powerful holistic healing. In the book Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, the murderer Jean-Baptiste was taking lives in order to extract components of their body for a special perfume that he wanted to create, which describes reductionism in the darkest of portrayals. In the song Scentless Apprentice, Kurt is being very aggressive against those of the mind of the murderer. When he says, "I promise not to tell your perfume secrets, there are countless formulas for pressing flowers." Like he's disdainfully putting it down that such people would understand his plans to become a true plant medicine healer. He's using sarcastic, wry humor to put down the way that harmful reductionists or murderers would think their own secrets to be so important when in fact they don't deserve his energy, and he'd rather tell his own secrets since they are positive and deserve to be spoken of and gain respect. So the lyrics are just looking to me, obviously, to be about him faking his death and becoming a perfumero, such as, "I lie in the soil and fertilize mushrooms. Leaking out gas fumes are made into perfume," as meaning that his supposed death will lead to his life as a perfumero. That line could be seen as an examination of reductionism compared to the natural biological processes of a mushroom, offering a picture of how his fake death will resemble a murder committed by those of the mindset of Jean-Baptiste, while also simultaneously showing the value of life over death, because the biological process of a mushroom renders a clean gas without isolation and separation from the holistic ecology. Also, the soil is symbolic of secrets, because the amazing things that do happen underground go unseen. The concept here that his dead body would be presumably what lies in the soil is brought into question now by the emphasis on secrets in this song and the symbolism of the soil as secrets, meaning that his fake death might have been planned secretly, so he's not even really the dead body pictured in the soil. And then he adds, "You can't fire me because I quit," like he quits his job as a rock star. And I feel too, this strongly indicates that his fake death was a way to avoid being murdered by violators of the mindset of Jean-Baptiste. So in other words, it goes, "You can't fire me," meaning you can't kill me to end my rock star career because I quit, meaning avoid being murdered by fake my death. Songs like Scentless Apprentice are blatant about the faked death, as I explained in the video section right before this. And there are other songs that seem just so blatant in this way, if you actually think about it, just in comparison with what I've already said, such as Tourette's and the lyrics, "Out of town, out of sight is my heart," as referring to the faked death. And also, "Queen of Lies today is my heart." I mean, of course, the Queen of Lies is Courtney Love in how she helped him fake his death, which resonates so well with the May Day reference in that song to the beautiful Beltane ceremony about union, true love, and marriage. That word also represents a call for help, which in this song I feel speaks of the sense of urgency and crisis inherent to his need to go through with the faked death in order to protect his life. In fact, Kurt calling Courtney the Queen of Lies also illuminates her coded message of interconnection with Tourette's through the song Miss World in the album Live Through This, when she famously says, "I am the girl, you know I lie and lie and lie." That song was actually recorded with Kurt Cobain in the studio. The title of the album Live Through This couldn't be more resonant of the idea that she knew Kurt's plan, when the album was all ready to come out just in time for right after his transition. In fact, on the cover of that album, she even wore a crown, perhaps to symbolize the Queen of Lies, which in this sense is a very positive thing, as someone so devoted in marriage that she would actually help Kurt orchestrate an elaborate 30-year passion project of a huge fabrication that he is not alive. As much as the loss has been difficult for their daughter Frances, it seems that Kurt Cobain was planning this staged event from the early days of Bleach, if not sooner, and he felt it was truly the right thing to marry and have a child before leaving. With all due respect to his decision, as him being the most capable to weigh out the ethics for his own life path, I feel the obvious here is that Courtney Love was the greatest choice of a co-conspirator he could have dreamed of. And that song Tourette's, which emphasizes the Beltane Union ceremony of May Day, truly is the most gorgeous song about how much love there was in that plan together. Now, I've spoken here of two dynamics. One, it seems that there was a life-saving emergency reason for his own safety as to why Kurt Cobain faked his death, and two, somewhat in contrast, it also seems that Kurt was planning all this since at least the early days of Nirvana's debut album, Bleach. But these two ideas are not in conflict. A man who has been planning to fake his death for a long time, but who has an unexpected rise to fame later in his career and is faced with very immediate dangers and problems as to how his art is received by the masses, when it was not designed necessarily to defend him against the dangers inherent to this level of fame, would be finding there is an easy way out of these unexpected and heightened new threats. Just having had the plan designed and largely pieced together already would make it seem logically to be the perfect resolution to the life-threatening problems which seem indicated to have been escalating around the time of his departure. About that, it's interesting to note that many stars have rehashed or used the Nirvana lyric, "Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you." Because media figures in particular say that they resonate with that as the experience of a star, since with fame comes antagonism, hate, threats, and violations due to the sheer mass of the high-volume public. Even Marilyn Manson recently rehashed that iconic lyric in his newest album, One Assassination Under God, in the song Raise the Red Flag. And he's the ideal to do it, as someone who has said that he has at times actually received hundreds of death threats per day. Even one death threat per day for a star that is less controversial than him is a terrifying experience. Another example of more blatant songs about the faked death is Endless Nameless, which I feel if you apply the idea that Kurt may have faked his death, it means so much in that way. And also All Apologies, which I feel is a sort of apology song, sort of apologizing for faking his death and leaving us. In that song, the lyric "married, buried" is very strongly emphasized and seems to obviously tell the story of his plan to marry Courtney Love and soon after fake his death, which happened. Now, with all that explained about the lyrical code, I want to speak a little about Kurt's new path in music, singing the traditional ayahuasca aiqueros. More often than not, ayahuasqueros will memorize these songs from a sometimes long oral lineage, as passed down by generations of medicine people. But every ayahuasca song originally comes from the same place, directly from the medicine itself. Within the ceremonies, the singer will have the experience of total physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual unity, totally at one with the plant teachers. In that state, that is how the singer will bring through the aiquero from the medicine. The experience is of receiving a song from them, but also identifying with the creation of the music as the creator itself. The song is then memorized and passed on to one's students. The songs have a very particular series of themes, such as, for example, being fairly repetitive to encourage a meditative state, and there are countless more mind-blowing ways that the medicine specifically uses this sound healing work to guide the journeys musically as a non-invasive and yet highly complex healing technique, which is stunningly beautiful and moving. The healing properties of the sound make it by no means anything like an outside influence which is forcing you to conform to strict measures. It's totally the opposite. And I mention that because I want to now visit upon the incredible insight of Krist Novoselic in his iconic jokes, which turned out to be a reference to the new musical path of Kurt Cobain's, which he was planning with him. Previous to Kurt's transition, Krist made several prophetic references to suicide in his interviews. And I say it was prophetic because he was not speaking of literal suicide, but he proposed the idea of commercial suicide, career suicide, musical suicide, and the most dynamic idea, creative suicide. Now, if these jokes don't imply that he knew, even then, the information that I'm presenting in this documentary about Kurt's later path in the medicine, I don't know what does. Commercial suicide was referring to artistic decisions that may alienate or deter commercial success, but are made for the sake of artistic integrity or experimentation. Musical suicide was describing choices or directions in music that may lead to a decline in popularity or critical acclaim, often due to departing from established styles or conventions. Career suicide was referring to choices or actions that may damage one's professional reputation or prospects, often by taking risks or going against industry norms. Now, thank God it was about this and not just some kind of weird obsession with suicide from Chris when all this was about to happen with Kurt, because this all makes so much sense. And finally, creative suicide is about actions or decisions that may harm one's creative process or output, often by conforming to external pressures or expectations. Now, I really thought it was worth explaining about the way creative sovereignty works in the creation of Icaro music, because it is in no way creative suicide. Ayahuasca does not deliver Icaros in such a way as external pressures and expectations. In fact, I would argue that if there was any creative suicide of any kind throughout the arc of Kurt's career, it was perhaps more at play during his time conforming to the music industry prior to his departure from the public eye. But if you think that moving on from just writing your own songs to creating Icaro music as one with the ayahuasca plant medicine is really creative suicide, you and I are having a disagreement here. As an ayahuasquera, I can't say enough about that. And I just love, though, how Chris threw in that challenging and dynamic joke with the other three of them, because I think that's just brilliant and thought-provoking, as always with Nirvana. Also, the rest of the types of suicide, commercial, career, and musical, should be considered hopefully not true either to his later path with ayahuasca music, in terms of how well received he might be if he returns in an authentic way to the spotlight. But that's somewhat debatable perhaps, and it leads to some shocking and very funny conversations. So, it's finally time to get right down to it and take a look at exactly what some of these visions included and how they connected with the information I've presented here so far, especially the news coverage of Kurt's supposed death. Now, there were 8 visions, and each one breaks open to enough information to give a long speech about it. So it's going to take me several facets to properly run through everything and all the meanings that I've actually found in them. In this first extra long facet, I will tell of the vision, which was the base for the whole concept that this was about Kurt Cobain. It started out with a portrait of this man's greenhouse in Peru. This was after some extensive visions in a previous night about a very exclusive and tight group of perfumeros in Peru, which included Kurt, complete with the detailed information about their medicine practices and exactly how they conduct their ceremonies. I understood this greenhouse to belong to one of these perfumeros in Peru who was an expert brewer who produced a high volume of ayahuasca for global distribution. I was informed that I have already sat in ayahuasca ceremonies in which the medicine was indirectly supplied from his personal brew made by him. It was made clear that even in the rural Peruvian Amazon, his plants would be a valuable commodity. So it was necessary for the crop to be protected from invaders. It went on to show that this amazing man's greenhouse really had the best security system imaginable, one which was much more effective than any security system you can possibly buy. A theoretical portrayal of what would happen if an invader came to intrude at the greenhouse showed the person experiencing the alarms of the security system as a very intense internal psychological experience, where the person would think that the police were after them immediately or something like that, and would have a huge panic attack and start running away, likely stumbling and losing control as they desperately try to escape as quickly as they can, with very immediate and intense alarm. At the time, this didn't strike me as unusual at all, since I'm already aware that ayahuasca and other plant spirit medicines do have spiritual protection very often, and this sounded like that. But it did sound really royal level for this man to have such a great protection on his plants so that he can keep people in supply. The people he was supplying and the work they were all up to must have been important, because as I have witnessed with my own eyes, theft of ayahuasca plants does happen from time to time, even in the remote jungle. So this must have been a very key person. Now, as the story goes in the news, Kurt Cobain's body was actually found in a greenhouse, which was built into his house, on the day that a security system was going to be installed there. The body was found by the security agent when he arrived to install the security equipment. Of all things, I couldn't believe that his body was actually found in a greenhouse. I've researched several versions of the news, and the majority of the reporters are actually calling it a greenhouse specifically, even though to me it looks like just a mudroom with windows all the way around on 3 of the 4 walls. But anyway, with it being so often called that, obviously ayahuasca took the opportunity and ran with it to create the visions as an image of interconnection between Kurt's reported death and his new life in Peru. Also, in retrospect, it doesn't seem necessary in the Amazon to use a greenhouse in order to properly grow the plants. And at a high volume, the amount of greenhouse enclosures needed would be a huge industrial-looking zone, which to me seems unlikely to really exist. So that, I think, adds to the relevance of the news coverage to the visions, making them seem more about Kurt than anything. And this statement about his level of personal security, in that he would have faked his death, is absolutely poignant. If he managed to fake his death instead of actually be a dead body on the floor that day, he obviously didn't need a commercial security system installation at all. That point is so well illustrated by the deeply ironic story of the security arriving only to discover his dead body. And it serves to reason that the protection of the ayahuasca plant medicine would have been much more effective than those police integrated systems, since the plants work in spirit and there is no possibility of corruption. However, this has gotten me thinking over the years that if I was to imagine that Kurt had been murdered, I would have to say the most suspicious party surrounding that time was definitely the security company. Because what gave them the sense of permission to enter the home without the door even willfully opened for them? Just because they were hired for an installation does not mean they have a right to enter into someone's home without the door being answered for them, and that's looking very out of place to me. That said, I'm not ready to get started yet on my theories of how Kurt faked his death exactly. But I have an excellent in-depth theory from the perspective of the Shipibo Konibo worldview and from a very educated place about Nirvana's core values, which I will present in future facets. Now, that was the base of my discovery that it was about Kurt Cobain. But I'll give you a brief introduction to the rest of the visions now, which expanded from there by providing more information about it. In future facets, I will also explore some of the fascinating breakdowns of my interpretations of those visions, which brings so much relevant perspective to Kurt Cobain's physical health, personal safety, changed appearance in his new life, and his unique goals and relationships with the medicine in his new line of work. What came next was a vision of Kurt Cobain with a changed physical appearance, showing his upper body without a shirt, which is common in the incredibly humid jungles of Peru, where I was able to see his exact physical health, specifically the development of muscles to a more normal, healthy weight, and a straight spine with good posture. Next, there was a detailed description of Kurt Cobain's home life in Peru. He was described as having 2 homes, one in Iquitos, which was filled with fascinating things like musical instruments and curious items, and it had an artistic and playful decorating flair that matches Kurt's personality. His other home was deep in the jungle of Peru, which was a beautiful banana leaf roof temple, which was spacious enough to host a moderately large amount of people. In another vision, the story was told about how one day invaders attacked and broke into his jungle home, and the harrowing story of how he peacefully caused them to leave using highly specialized non-violent techniques. And in another vision, his brewing technique, the tools he uses, and a fairly exact amount of time spent in preparation of the ayahuasca brew was broken down with great complexity to explain his high-volume emphasis on preparing so much medicine for large-scale distribution. Also, in that series of ceremonies, I had a couple visions which I later related to the Foo Fighters. It took me longer to realize that these two visions were connected to the Foo Fighters at all, and it was a lot of fun to realize that after I had already created the first version of this documentary. The first depicted a futuristic light gun, which would theoretically shoot some kind of beautiful neon laser light, similar to classic brilliant neon medicine visions. Eventually, I related that vision with the image of the futuristic gun depicted on their self-titled debut album, Foo Fighters. That vision also included an image of police in an abstract morphing image which spanned throughout my entire perception, where they were being held at bay and not dangerous to me as they flexed their muscles, comfortably and gladly showing off their muscular arms and bodies, which were very highly emphasized. I felt that vision with the information about the police being able to be controlled or pacified, related with my theory that police cooperation may have been the key to Kurt Cobain's faked death. I also thought the emphasis on the other vision about Kurt Cobain's muscle mass improving in later years seems somehow tied in with this, although it's abstract. The other vision about the Foo Fighters was truly an incredible, life-changing vision with a shocking story in my life afterwards connected to it, which it's very hard for me to talk about. To me, this makes sense because I feel that the Foo Fighters is largely themed around the topic of paradigmatic censorship and the graceful exploration of striving to overcome it, especially using humor. The vision was about the extreme fact that sometimes illusions, false constructs, which are held deeply for a purpose, can have a negative power over my life. And this was a theme of my ceremonies at the time, with some deep, ongoing healing that I was doing about learning to grapple with the illusions that people in my life are proposing so intensely and so consistently, and how I must learn to see through the veil in the social order in order to heal. That ethic resonates strongly for me in the creation of this documentary, because no matter how comfortable it may be to let things lie, it is crucial to our evolution to learn how to discern and see past misinformation. In future facets, I will have to tell the extreme story of my Foo Fighters visions from 2017 in that round of ceremonies and how they massively changed my life by teaching me some incredible things about the entertainment media and even the nature of reality. Now, after my graduation ceremonies in 2017, I had a long break from ayahuasca ceremonies, which was the longest break I've taken since I began on my path with the medicine. During that time, I created the first version of this documentary in video form. It was not until after that was fully released that I even had a chance to return to my ayahuasca ceremonies and consult with the medicine. I approached the medicine with humility to ask with no expectations for the most honest feedback about my interpretations of the visions in 2017 as being about Kurt Cobain. Needless to say, the message that I received from ayahuasca about this was more than confirming of my understanding of the visions, and it was indeed very in-depth. Through all the ongoing ceremonies I've had since that time, I've gotten constant major confirmation of my documentary as being entirely the intention of the plant teachers, as well as much more about this topic. I can't possibly explain all the visions here, as there were far too many. They confirmed absolutely that the 2017 ceremonies were truly intended to prove that Kurt is alive, and they celebrated Kurt's incredibly beautiful part to play in my life, enriching my life so much with his supportive contributions, such as this documentary becoming possible. The medicine offered stories about how Kurt Cobain had changed the appearance of his face. They shared with me that some stars have pursued him in Peru and found him and succeeded in reconnecting in person secretly. They showed me that he has always felt a connection to me through the healing ceremonies and visions of ayahuasca, and that he has profound love for me and has intended for me to find this information with all his heart. The plants celebrated that he has always sent his deepest blessings for my success as a medicine woman and holds me in the highest regard. They brought through so much about how unwaveringly Kurt believes in me and has the ultimate confidence in my ability to do the best job on this work of art for him and in his honor, while they brought through many similar messages themselves about their confidence and pride in my work. They also took the time to investigate with me the story of Kristen Pfaff from Hole, who supposedly died a short time after Kurt Cobain, also at the age of 27. In response to rumors that I had heard that Kurt and Kristen were having an affair behind Courtney's back and talking about running away together shortly before the supposed deaths both occurred, the medicine explained that they were not romantically involved at all. As the story goes from the visions, Kristen and Kurt were faking that they were involved in a romance, deliberately putting out false gossip that they were planning to run away together as a couple, as a coded hint which they felt would symbolize the fact that Kristen was also faking her death in order to go with Kurt to Peru, not for a romance at all, but to investigate the traditionally celibate practices of ayahuasca together as friends. This information was intended to be easy to make sense of in combination with later findings of my documentary precisely, which would clarify the likelihood of their fake gossip about a romance as being code communication to mean this. In fact, it was clarified by ayahuasca that Kurt has always intended for the news of him being alive to come out in this way through ayahuasca eventually. His plan was for the delivering of the information in context to the Shipibo Konibo traditions to break open the meanings of the Nirvana discography in the ways I have provided. As well, the visions also confirmed my understanding of the importance of cooperation and integration between the band Nirvana and other stars in this branch of the entertainment media, for the collaborative importance of sharing the weight of this enormous responsibility to the truth that Kurt is alive together. First of all, Courtney Love was featured beautifully in my visions with some of the most exquisite portrayals of how her entire being is so perfectly matched with what I do in this documentary, showing her to be the angel of this project to the deepest levels, mind, body, and spirit, as one who blesses it in every dimension of her existence. Also, most prominently, the band Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson especially, as well as also his wife Lindsay, were given incredibly high honors by the medicine. Manson was shown to be a true master and beloved spiritual mystic, truly the key, as an immense support to my work in this endeavor, which he already has been through his music and our various forms of connection, which has also included Lindsay's deeply valued part in this. Also, many other stars who I'm especially connected to were beautifully honored in my visions as key characters who are part of the conspiracy and will always be in devotional service to playing their beautiful part in the unraveling of the illusion that Kurt has died. And an unnamed star, who will remain anonymous here, was shown to have given a huge ceremonial offering of mapacho tobacco to the earth in accordance with Shipibo Konibo traditions in honor of this documentary project, which he has given his heartfelt blessings to. I only wish I could mention all the names of everyone who was honored. And I'll never forget the huge vision when I was bathed in love from the band Nirvana. My vision had me absolutely flushed with the most gorgeous experience of just receiving the most powerful, beautiful, divine love from Dave Grohl, Krist Novoselic, and Pat Smear, not to mention Kurt, although he is in another location. The medicine was very strong in that time, and it was incredible. Now, coming back to connections between the information that I've received from ayahuasca and the Nirvana materials, let's take a look at the 2015 Nirvana Facebook post, which said in Spanish, "It is true, Kurt is alive. He needed time to learn to play the guitar with his right hand. finding left-handed guitars is not easy. We are so happy to have him back and forgive him for all the sadness that we've held so deeply in our hearts. And they included a link to a Kurt Cobain-inspired performance in Peru. Now, for me, this statement alone was obviously a thrill to see, but combined with the specific mention of Peru, I was totally blown away. Very certain that this was too much of a perfect correlation with the information that I already have from ayahuasca about his whereabouts to be anything but a confirmation of my knowledge that he's alive. The Peruvian artist linked in the post was an impersonator of Kurt Cobain, but not just a simple impersonator at all. The performance was at a venue called Yo Soy, which translates to I am. And it was one of at least 9 performances at Yo Soy in which Ramiro Saavedra Linares performed as Kurt Cobain for a panel of judges who would judge if it was really Kurt Cobain or just an impersonator. Each time, the judges decided yes or no, and he got various yes and no judgments at every show, but always with deep introspective and philosophical conversations from the judges about how exactly they would know if it was really Kurt Cobain or not. They said some incredibly potent things, like one said that he felt the true answer must come ultimately from internal realization within, because that is the only way to recognize the true identity of anyone, as the I am presence within yourself will be the source of true recognition. Personally, I found that to also be incredibly relevant. In my search for an answer as to whether this man was Kurt Cobain or not, I decided that it was not literally Kurt. That, however, did not faze me one bit, as I imagine this would have been intended as a coded hint about Kurt's whereabouts, not a simple and blatant statement. You see, the style of how to reveal that Kurt is alive did seem here way too sudden and short-winded to be acceptable as a way to fully reveal this extremely complex truth, and the long stories that go with it to the world. In fact, I couldn't have been more right, as every reporter that covered this mysterious post from Nirvana was certain that it was intended as a brutal humiliation ritual against fans who may be considering the conspiracy theory that Kurt is alive. At first, I was only angered at this take on Nirvana that they would ever be so cruel-hearted as to take part in a public humiliation ritual against good-natured artists like Ramiro or fans who are just seeking inspiration about Kurt's life. It took me a while to understand their point of view and why they would not consider the possibility that it was a coded hint, not intended literally in every way as a news statement. But I found it when I eventually discovered a comment in Bosnian, which was added by Nirvana to their Facebook post, which said, "Dear children, everything is true on Facebook." I could understand then why reporters felt that the entire post must have been just a sarcastic joke. That said, I easily found a double meaning in that comment, since I for one have struggled endlessly on Facebook, encountering an outrageously high volume of hatred and evil against Courtney Love, proposing that she is Kurt Cobain's murderer. In fact, I've even seen people claim that Dave Grohl was the murderer of Kurt Cobain on Facebook, which might be nicknamed the seventh underbelly of hell when it comes to Nirvana Facebook groups specifically. It's as if that comment from Nirvana was saying, I know you'll immediately doubt what we're saying here, but in that very sense, I'd like to cast the atmosphere of doubt over all of Facebook rather than keep it limited to just this one post. But most of all, I felt that Nirvana's comment in Bosnian was a joke which pointed out just how interesting it is that if they did say that Kurt Cobain was alive, just simply and blatantly at least, it would intrinsically destroy their credibility right there based on how much they've already lied about this so far, and thus neutralize the believability of their entire point right as they make it. Indeed, it would take much more than just speaking the truth to somehow make this statement openly. And I also loved their other comment, which said, I thought people like conspiracy theories. I can't do anything right. Which I felt seemed like an affirmation of my views, But I thought so even more once I reflected on the Bosnian comment later when I saw it, because this may have also been a snarky jab against the conspiracy theorists who proposed that Courtney or Dave actually killed Kurt Cobain. Perhaps a little like saying, I knew you wouldn't like hearing that Kurt is alive when you're obsessed with hating on Courtney, so don't conspiracy theory me about the idea that Kurt is alive. I throw it right back at you. Personally, I thought that comment sounded a lot like Dave in my opinion. What do you think? It was also a deep reflection for me about the part of the original statement in which they said, he needed time to learn to play the guitar with his right hand. Finding left-handed guitars is not easy. For me, I thought right away that was a joke, although not at all one which contradicted the main point of the post, that Kurt is alive. I thought the joke was about Kurt Cobain's level of skill and learning ability, because actually it would take an incredible amount of work to learn new things in order to successfully fake one's death. And the humor in it is that Kurt really never has gotten as much respect as he has deserved, since he often downplayed himself in his interviews, saying things like that he can't play the guitar very well at all. Anyone paying attention can see that's not true. It makes so much sense if he was planning to fake his death that he would want to downplay his skill levels quite a bit in order to cover up his genius plans. In Kurt's exact sense of humor, I suppose pretending to be dumb, aka playing dumb, can very often be the smartest thing one can do. In fact, I must add as well, I found that Nirvana's songs are so intelligent in the sense that they are often easy to cover, which was such a smart move because it caused Nirvana covers to be tremendously popular and contributed so much to their fame. But as we see here, it may have also served another purpose as well. In that sense, it's truly a tragedy that no one got that joke from Nirvana, seeing that it would be such an ironic or sarcastic joke if they were somehow saying that he's really not able to learn how to play the guitar right-handed even after 21 years of practice since faking his death. So that means that this is a humiliation ritual against the idea that a right-handed guitar player like Ramiro could possibly be Kurt. It's really so funny as a joke that makes fun of the rude attitude towards Kurt that wouldn't see him as an intelligent and capable person. The true fans know that Kurt Cobain was always a genius, and those are the people who will resonate the most with what I'm saying. That all said, it's amazingly ironic how the most blatant statement that Kurt is alive could be such a double-edged sword for me. I felt a bit of mixed feelings about the way that Nirvana seemed wide open to inevitably being taken the wrong way by the vast majority of everyone viewing it. They seem to know full well that not only would it fail miserably for them to say Kurt is alive, but they should actually play that up and make it into a comedy as to just how miserably they would always fail in delivering this truth to the masses if it was done too quickly and without proper explanation. However, I was very pleased that they took the opportunity to make a coded and mystery school level statement to the public about this for me to receive. I always wondered if Dave, Chris, and Pat had been informed of me through their own ayahuasca ceremonies on occasion, just as I was informed of Kurt. If so, I know they had a smile in their hearts when they posted this, as it was more a personal gift to me at the time than for anyone else on earth. Now, I just want to mention one wonderful quote from Kurt Cobain from his interviews that really seemed to be a reference to his plan to move to Peru and become a curandero perfumero. He said, "I guess I always secretly wanted to be a doctor." And there's much more I'll be speaking of in later facets about the important distinction to be made here as to which kind of doctor that would be. What Kurt meant was curandero, which is a term very similar to the word doctor itself, as it literally translates to a curer, one who cures ailments. A medical doctor of the power institution of the medical sector, synonymous with big pharma, would be someone who actually thinks ayahuasca is likely to cause psychiatric illness because of its way of encouraging visions. As an ayahuasquera medicine woman, I cannot say enough about that as a misguided and clueless misunderstanding. Now, Kurt Cobain was very anti-establishment and punk, and there's no way he was saying a doctor such as someone who prescribes addictive opiates and Valium. He meant a curandero, someone who would feature the whole plant of the poppy flower as a statement against reductionism and against plant abuse and disrespectful extraction practices for reasons of corporate greed. No matter how loud Kurt was about the idea that he was addicted to opiates, there's no way he would say he wants to be a doctor as just meaning he would want to be able to write himself prescriptions for drugs. To say that in his interview in reference to his stage art would be like saying that he advises other people to do drugs, of that kind especially, and that couldn't be further away from his attitude. He was always very clear that he's not here to advise the public that they should become addicted to opiates. He's not saying that he wants to be a doctor as what Nirvana is about, like giving everyone prescriptions to opiates to get them hooked on drugs. If you look deeply into him, you can see that he was the definition of punk. He simply had no allegiance to the men, such as doctors, as creepy authority figures like that. Now, I want to explain a little about this documentary series, Nirvana, Kurt Cobain is Alive, the 72 radiant diamond facets of the 27 Club in 144. First of all, many people tell me that they don't know what the 27 Club is. The term was coined after the mysterious apparent death of Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison of the Doors, when they all apparently died at the same time, between the years of 1969 and 71, all at the age of 27. Fans were searching fruitlessly for the meaning in their strange numerological synchronicity of their transitions at the age of 27, until the faked death of Kurt Cobain occurred in 1994. His mother popularized the notion of his joining the 27 Club by saying that she had been speaking to him about his idea to join the 27 Club and had been herself against the idea. At that point, the term the 27 Club was massively popularized, along with a wave of fan conspiracy theories which proposed that not just Kurt, but all of those stars had faked their deaths, deliberately leaving a numerological clue behind to give their fans an urgent hint that they may have collectively banded together to fabricate their deaths. Because Nirvana's artwork seemed to, in so many cases, foretell of Kurt's future high-profile death, even specifically timed shortly after his marriage, which it was, and much more, fans started to gain confidence that it was a faked death, which had been designed into the discography and the artwork of the band, deliberately with the plan in mind. With that, other supposed deaths of stars at the age of 27 were gathered to be fake and associated with the 27 Club, such as Kristen Pfaff of Hole, who transitioned shortly after Kurt Cobain at the age of 27, and Amy Winehouse, who also transitioned at 27 and had even said at the age of 25 that her prediction was she would join the 27 Club in 2 years. And she did. Today, that popular theory of the time is no longer commonly upheld, but I'd love to bring it back into popularity if I could, since it has always immediately resonated with me. The thing is, my information about Kurt Cobain being alive defies the idea that a faked death would have to be one where there is no body found anywhere. Somehow, perhaps with a completely staged scenario, such as Kurt Cobain posing for photos with blood on the floor, not dead, but creating fake photos, and with police involvement and conspiracy in the matter. Or in some other way, it must have been somehow successful despite the body being supposedly found. Simply, I imagine that if Kurt Cobain somehow had a way of doing this, it may have been possible for other stars as well. In fact, knowing so clearly that Kurt must have faked his death, I take his distinct choice to do so at the age of 27 to be a message from him, loud and clear, that he would love the public to consider these other stars as well once they find the information in this documentary. Throughout my studies of this pattern and my explorations of the band world, I found that many musical artists have a great fascination with numerology. And this, in combination with Nirvana's huge interest in the Beatles, all led me to create the artistic title of this documentary. You see, Paul McCartney also faked his death at the age 27, as the only one to join the 27 Club without even appearing to be dead at all in the public eye. There were actually two pieces about this, one in which Paul supposedly died at age 24 and one at age 27, but the one at age 27 had way more content. This story has many details, but the long story short is that the Beatles generated their own fan conspiracy theory that Paul had died in a car accident at the age of 27 and been replaced with a look-alike impersonator, a man named Billy Shears, who was handpicked by their manager Brian Epstein in a look-alike contest. Epstein hosted the contest because, in his words, he'd like to have a replacement in case one of the band members would die someday. The Beatles snuck the name of that Paul McCartney impersonator, Billy Shears, into the lyrics of their album Sgt. Pepper. And in the White Album, they placed a section of music that, when played backwards, says, "Paul is dead, miss him, miss him, miss him." In fact, Nirvana even made reference to that when Chris mentioned in an interview, with Kurt by his side, that if you play in utero backwards, it says Kurt is dead. And there was much more to the conspiracy theory as well. As was widely promoted on the cover of Life and other magazines, fans were very widely, absolutely convinced that Paul was dead. And yet, in my opinion, it was the opposite. He had joined the 27 Club to show that a faked death is possible, even in the most obscenely unbelievable circumstances when the band member is not even gone. So, in honor of the White Album, Paul is Dead conspiracy, and of the music played backwards, saying famously, Paul is dead, I considered the idea that the number 27 was intended as a mirror opposite of the number 72. You see, 72 is traditionally a number that symbolizes life itself, because it is deeply associated with the ancient Hebrew 72 names of God, which is considered the living God. In fact, Marilyn Manson actually explained it better than I could in his song Deep Six, which goes into the meaning of 666, as the lyrics say Deep 666, and it goes on. In fact, 72 is 9 times 9 times 9, which, if you think about it that way, happens to be 666 upside down. Or should I say, 666 is 999 upside down. Also, 27 is 9 plus 9 plus 9, so it has the same connotation in addition as it does with multiplication. The lyrics of that song go, love is evil, sin is sincere, con is confidence, eros is sore. Which to me brings so much light to the concept that if you have to play the White Album backwards to know death, then death in this case must be an illusion. Because in fact, I could go into this so in depth philosophically, but simply put, love is not evil, and evil is not even really a word. In that sense, the song Deep Six really is the most incredibly synoptical song about this 27-72 dynamic I'm speaking of. Putting it that way, you see the meaning of my documentary title. It implies that just as so many enlightened masters have taught, death is fundamentally an illusion, especially in this case of the faked deaths of the 27 Club. In fact, I must warn you, I have dubbed Marilyn Manson as the key to the 27 Club. And this is by no means the only 27 Club mystery school level of deep support that his art has provided to this documentary so well that it makes me suspect that he's known what I know for a very long time. He's earned a big place in my work about this, and if you look into my playlist related to this show, you'll see that I already have a long 2-hour special which explains many ways in which his work is relevant to this and has been a huge support, as well as my breakdown of how he is innocent of the obscene false allegations against him. If you believe that it should be innocent until proven guilty in this world, then I urge you to watch me prove Marilyn Manson is innocent on my video about him, which is called the MM2. This stands for Marilyn Manson is Innocent and Marilyn Manson 2, as symbolic of the illusory, false image of himself that follows him around like a shadow, or even more poignantly said, like a stalker. Just like Kurt Cobain's famous quote, "Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you." So, coming back to the 72 names of God. These 72 divine names are ancient Hebrew names, and I decided to create a work of art inspired by a new and very different selection of the 72 different divine names of the living God by a double PhD theological scholar, J.J. Hurtak, author of the book The Keys of Enoch. His selection includes not only Hebrew names for God, but also Aramaic, and spans later into history to also include names that refer to Jesus Christ, and not just pre-Christ names for God. I took the 72 divine names from this selection and authored a single poetic English word inspired by each, along with 2 diamond-shaped glyphs for each. You can see the list of titles and their numbering inside the PDF of this video and the book as well, which is coming out soon to date. The reason I decided to use poetic words instead of the actual names of God was because I don't want anyone to feel roped into participating with anything religious just because they're adoring and appreciating my art and a fan of this information. This is not a religious program or affiliated in any way with the church of any kind. Also, this series of 144 glyphs with 72 titles was made into a coloring book for all ages and abilities, and was designed to act as the template for this series of videos that I've been planning to create. The concept is that I could simply go on practically forever talking about this, so I'd like to have 72 videos potentially by the end, and I'll follow along with this gorgeous master series of art as I do it. To check in with more information about the making of these facets, you can search the Instagram at Nirvana, Kurt Cobain is Alive, or the YouTube channel at unity.life.mystery.school. This article is the result of 6 years so far in this project since I started my first Nirvana, Kurt Cobain is Alive Instagram fan page in 2018. The decision to delete the previous version of the series and start again was a difficult one, but felt truly meant to be. And I took the opportunity to synergize the most pragmatically compelling information from the entire span of the series into the first article and video, which you are now watching. This was so that one facet can serve alone without too much practical need for investigation of the rest of the series. In doing this, I've brought out much more information from the lyrics than I had originally documented. The original version of the series was truly iconic and was done as an investigative comedy looking into some down-to-earth and other more wildly spiritual perspectives on this information. To commemorate this special occasion of the new release, I will be compiling the written version of this video, edited into a book format, together with the support tools that I created to go along with this documentary series. These support tools include the Unity Life coloring book, which is a coloring book of 72 facets in 144, specifically created for the ecological design of one's life. It also includes the 64 cards for all ages and abilities, which is an ecological strategy set, which fosters ecological mindset, strategic mindset, and pattern language recognition. Both support tools teach how we as human life can realize our place as part of the ecology as a whole by practicing the strategies of nature. Ecologists have found that all of nature practices fairly universal strategies of its own, and these are universal approaches which can be equally well done by any age or ability level. Based on the ecological theme of Nirvana's discography, along with my specialization in ecological education for all ages and abilities, which goes so well with my path as an ayahuasquera, I've chosen to integrate this article with these support tools, which are themed on what I call visionary ecology. I feel that the support tools serve to contextualize the information about Nirvana's plan to help Kurt Cobain fake his death, and his ongoing work in the Shipibo Konibo traditions, showing the types of strategies that they've been using, and inspiring the resonance of the community which gathers through this artwork to share in the ecological mindset which they've been demonstrating all these years. I also feel that it's important to show how the wisdom of the Amazonian pharmacopoeia of these plant medicine traditions, the plant medicine teachers, can be explored safely in an all ages and abilities framework within the expanded context of the larger ecology as a universally applicable template. This proves easily that no one is excluded from the teachings of nature, such as those who are not a candidate to be participating in psychedelic plant medicine ceremonies. Active participation in ayahuasca and other plant medicine healing work is not for everyone, but it's important to understand that we're all connected, and those who are working with the medicine are carrying us all in a way, while we tap in with the same source through grounding with the earth, each in our own unique and individual way, all as equals. Throughout the 6 years that I've been working on this project, I've always made an effort to voice my developing theories and personal life experiences in relation to this branch of the entertainment media on Instagram. Instagram has been an important vehicle of personal expression for me while I've been going through fascinating studies of the arts and personal experiences in connection with the stars directly sometimes. These ongoing reels of me speaking about my insights and other posts have often developed into formal videos that eventually became a more thoroughly well-designed part of this documentary. This project is actually sprawled into a number of elaborate side projects, like entire Instagram accounts that were filled with material, which is now privately archived and ready to be produced into a new facet. If you would be interested in my work, I strongly encourage you to follow me on Instagram at Nirvana, Kurt Cobain is Alive, and unity.life.mystery.school. This whole process on Instagram has inspired me to do the following facets in this documentary in a way which will not always be as carefully crafted as this formal video and the corresponding article. Future facets may be like this one, or they may be just rough sketches brought through ad-lib and thrown together easily just to get my ideas basically across. My dream is to be one day hired by the band Nirvana or another related band or media figure to create the polished versions of all these rough sketches that will be coming out, some of which are already complete. I just feel a certain passion for bringing through the information, but I seek to balance this with making the execution of the process more easy and time efficient for myself. I also thrive on reflecting back on my work over long periods of time, which seems to go well with returning back to a piece and redoing it every now and then. This facet, followed by the ongoing related works, will always be available on the Nirvana Kurt Cobain is Alive YouTube playlist, found linked in the main website. See the description on this video for a reference to those links. Thank you for watching Nirvana, Kurt Cobain is Alive, the 72 radiant diamond facets of the 27 Club in 144. As they say at 7-Eleven type corner stores where 7 and 11 makes 72 on their bags, which classically often have a vintage smiley face on them, have a nice day.